0502, August 2nd, 2026, right now marks 2,650 hours of progress on the global heart simulation. Currently, it's been figured out how to send a array of positions or similar data to a material in Unreal Engine 5. And this is interesting because by default, the Unreal Engine material graph does not allow for arrays to be passed. It only allows for textures, and learning how to correctly send that data to a material through a texture was somewhat tricky. And so basically what this material does is look at the texture and compare some values. And so what the actual code does is create a texture in memory with each of the pixels set to a specific random value. Well, the last value of a vector 4 is the random part, and then it sets it between values 50,000 and 100,000. And this was used as a test to see if the sampler in Unreal Engine 5 can have colors be unmodified. So looking at the actual texture sample, or more accurately, color nodes, the colors range in values between 0 and 1, and so what it was originally thought is that the texture might get compressed or adjusted in a way so that the actual vector values would be smaller, but this seems to disprove that, as the logic is able to detect areas that have a value above 50,000 on the W component. And so that's what this is, a 2x2 texture, and each pixel has a vector, and the final element of that is random. And so what this should allow or prove is that it is possible to send an array of positions to the GPU in Unreal Engine and use that in the material data. So to prove that this is seemingly working, another test was done with the actual Unreal Engine built-in nodes, basically the same test, and it would appear that it also works here. And in order to prove that, this large value of 100,000, which is used because the values are actually being sent in a uint8 pointer, but the uint8's max possible value is 255, but it seems to have not been compressed or manipulated in a way that would cause that to be an issue. And so it seems that large values can be passed, and in order to prove that this actually works, what can be done is to break this link to the equals. And so what that should do is make it impossible for any pixel to be blue, because the value that is being passed in is 50,000, and they can never be less. They can either be 50,000 or 100,000. And so looking at that, it is always red, which proves that the actual data that was put into the array has been correctly copied into the texture, and the texture has been correctly uploaded to the GPU and accurately assigned to the material or the dynamic material instance on the object. And so what this should allow is for sending position data to the material, which could be useful for things like fog of war in a grid or some other tile-based logic, and things like dynamic textures that need to be updated at runtime. So if there's a list of positions in the level and they need to be updated, this could be useful for that for whatever reason. And so the intention going forward, now that it has been figured out how to send an array of positions to the GPU, is to look into using that for the voxel fog of war, although the positions of the voxels don't necessarily need to be stored, more so their state, which could be represented by a single value. It is still useful for prototyping the voxel fog of war.